Mack Rhoades told remaining Baylor baseball players a few weeks ago that he'd make a hire by July 1st. And, well, that date's getting closer and closer, and it sounds like there are some players who have narrowed their lists down to 2 names. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Drake Toll here alongside Cameron Stewart, the real Cam Stewart, a local news guy who now works at Sports Illustrated's Inside the Bears. Everybody.
Wow.
Cam Stewart making his way up in a local
Give it
news
up
game.
for me.
Yeah, big. And thanking you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. And by day, I mean Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the new summer schedule for Locked On Baylor, as yours truly is getting a sunburn and a Hawaiian shirt in Cape Cod. How about those Hyannis Harbor Hawks last night, huh? You see that?
How about
that? Against the Wareham Gatemen.
Wareham Gatemen.
If you don't know, you've been out of the loop. You got to get back in the loop. And I'll tell you what, I have been doing my best, Cam, to be in the loop for Baylor baseball, right, on this coaching search, and have found there is little to no loop. Once again, Mack Rhoades has done an impeccable job at keeping every phone call, every flight, everything hush.
Yeah, and he always gets it right. I just wanted to start by saying, by the way, Drake, how odd it is that of the two of us, that you're the one podcasting from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Very odd.
You're local.
Very odd. Yeah. Anyway, so I tweeted this out during the week. It's so weird that, there's, I feel like there's no buzz around this at all. Maybe that's because I'm in my own little world. Celtics are in the finals. Moved recently. That's taken up a lot of my time. I don't know. I wanted to throw that out to you. Does it feel like there's no buzz between, the coaching search, the players transferring to, your biggest rivals, your best players are leaving for your biggest competition, and, it's not really being talked about?
Yeah.
Is it weird to you, a little buzz? Am I just missing this?
Well, I feel like it's Baylor baseball in general, right?
Yeah, and most college baseball, to be fair. I love college baseball,
Exactly.
but most of it is pretty humble.
And you're seeing that with Baylor right now because you mentioned it. Trey Richardson goes to TCU, and people are like, "Oh, wow, well, that sucks." Had Gary Bohannon gone to TCU, people would have certainly made a much bigger stink about that. We would do a whole show or 3 shows over that. Trey Richardson goes to TCU, people are like, "Ah, dang." And then Kyle Nevin goes to Oklahoma. Kyle Nevin, arguably Baylor's best player down the stretch last season, goes to OU, and people are like, "Oh, see you later." There's not a lot of buzz around any of this going on, and Baylor's baseball program is being uprooted. But there's a common thought, and somebody tweeted this the other day, which I thought was really funny, but also vaguely true. Is well, these guys couldn't win when they played for Baylor, so goodbye, I guess. What are we really losing? And granted, I think it was the arms and not the bats that made Baylor so dismal this past season. But now in the coaching search, I spoke with. So you can't really speak to players. For everybody out there, if you don't know, if you speak to players without going through SID Max Calderon or any other SID for any sport, it's a big no-no. That's like an ethics violation. So we don't do that. So instead of talking to players, we talk to families of players or those that are alumni or close to the program, guys that are recently graduated. And I heard, a little bit of tea here, a little bit of tea. I heard from a brother of a player who may or may not be living in the same town as I am.
Okay.
A lot of the guys have narrowed their list down, or people that they like, down to Mitch Thompson from McClennan Community College. No surprise there. And Steven Trout from Texas State, which is for me, a bit harder of a sell. But Mitch Thompson at the top of our list. Sounds like it's on the top of the players' list too.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of reasonable guys coming to Baylor, I think that would probably still be our 1-2. I don't remember exactly how we put it in the order, tease to that podcast. But I would say that's probably your 1-2 in terms of reasonable guys. But the thing that keeps coming up with Mitch Thompson is the age factor. It's not kind of the model that Mack has hired coaches by. He wants them there long term. And not to say that Mitch Thompson can't coach, another 10 or 12 years, but he's not 35. And I think, Trout is 37, going on 38, I believe. He's going to turn 38 before he coaches for Baylor. It's Mitch Thompson, such a slam dunk, right? that's a guy I talked about it in the last podcast. We talked about coaching search, and you'll notice it in the Cape as well. Actually, JUCO coaches are the best because they just start from scratch every year, right? And they mega recruit. Like they have to recruit like to the max with less resources than a D1 program, especially even, Baylor being a private school D1 program puts you at even more of a disadvantage than the public schools. Yeah. JUCO's even further down below that. And those guys have to recognize talent that most of the time other college coaches aren't seeing. And with MCC, that case that Mitch Thompson's coaching, he's developing them into Power 5 guys that go into the Cape, guys that go and play professional baseball. So that's, aside from all the Baylor ties, I just love that model of a coach. But then again, we bring in his success at Baylor as an assistant for years in Baylor's best days, right? And, players, like you said, love him. Former players, friends of the podcast, all Big 12 selections, love him. And the prospect of him coming back to Baylor. And like we mentioned with the good players leaving too, we really are starting from scratch here. And it's not going to be a fun situation to recruit to. Again, with a private school and, limited scholarships with college baseball, it's always a struggle. But we've seen him succeed here before. So Mitch Thompson's definitely the slam dunk. But Steven Trout, very interesting, Drake. Very interesting. Very intriguing and a load of success.
You talk about, right, and Steven Trout brings that to the table, but Mitch Thompson, is there a risk what is the risk that's there in bringing in a JUCO guy to come to your Power 5 Division I school, especially when these guys are jumping ship? You mentioned it, right? That nobody can recruit the transfer portal better than the JUCO guys.
Yeah.
This is what they've been doing, is playing free agency their entire careers. So he's already got that under his belt. But then what is the downside, the risk of bringing in a JUCO coach to Baylor?
Honestly, I think it really just is the age. Like, I think, in other sport, you're not going to hire, a basketball or a football, another major sport, you're not going to hire a JUCO guy to be your head coach in Division I. But I think baseball is just so different because so many of the stars that are at D1 now play JUCO. Like, there's not the stigma there that there is in other sports. Like, that is a pretty traditional road for the most part. So genuinely, I think that's the only risk. And what I like about him as well is the style of play. Like, he is so, if you watch MCC play as a baseball purist, it's an absolute thing of beauty because they're so fundamentally sound. Like, you can clearly see how much he drills into the fundamentals and pitching. And that was something Baylor really desperately lacked the last couple of years, really, since that 2019 season when they did have some good pitching and they all got hurt. It hasn't really been the same since then. So in terms of a guy that's going to come in and start a program, you know what I mean? Start from scratch, like we're talking about. You're obviously at more of an advantage at a Baylor than most other schools, but coming in and kind of starting from scratch, you can bring in guys and they're going to play fundamentally sound baseball. You're going to have a lot of good arms coming in. That's a way to win games until you really build that program back up. So back to your question, though, disadvantage, I guess, would just be the age. He's not going to be there 20 years.
No.
But I think if you're Baylor,
he might be. Baseball coaches like live a long time.
Like, he's not decrepit. He's not walking. He's not in a walker. You know what I mean?
Tony La Russa's still coaching baseball.
Yeah, and being a fan favorite doing it for sure. Intentionally walking guys with 2 strikes. But all that to say, he can build your program back up pretty quickly. So even if he's not there 10 years, say, all of a sudden Baylor has a much better profile for the next head coach than it has right now.
I love
we talk about that with like football, with like Matt Rule. Say what you want about Matt Rule, but we don't have Dave Aranda without Matt Rule. You know what I mean? He instantly brought the program back on a pedestal. And I think Mitch Thompson can do that in short order. to be honest with you. I don't know if they'll go to Omaha in the next couple of years, but it will raise the profile of the job right now. Because right now, you're probably going to take your second crack at the Dallas Baptist coach, and he's probably going to say no for the second time. So do with that what you will.
The Hefner guy, yeah. That's good. I mean, you talk about fundamentals, one, and what we know, shootings for show-offs in the wise words of Nick Kroll. It's all about fundamentals. You remember what your father said about fundamentals.
Yes.
And the on the other side of that, too, you have the ability to, you need a guy that can create a program in year one. Look at Schloss. Schloss goes to Texas A&M from TCU, and in year one, they go from bottom of the SEC to College World Series, one of the top 10 programs in America right now. An unbelievable atmosphere, too, that he's created in College Station in 1 year of that excitement. Speaking, Cam, of excitement, I'm excited to watch the NBA Finals not because the Celtics are playing. No. Not because the Warriors are playing. Why would I care? Because I can go to betonline.net today, right now, right as I'm podcasting, right? I can go on my computer and go to betonline and put $5,000. I don't have $5,000. I can put $5 on the Celtics to win the NBA Finals. I can put $5 on the Warriors to do it. I can do so many things at betonline.net. Not only that, right now, this is funny. I mentioned Tony La Russa, right? Right now, you can go to betonline.net and bet on which MLB baseball coach will be fired next. Tony La Russa at plus 400 odds is the odds-on favorite to be the next guy to get fired. So that's how you want to make money. You can do it right now at BetOnline. BetOnline is where the game starts. Go check it out again. NBA Finals going on right now at BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. BetOnline. Cam, that's just so funny to me. They have lines for that kind of stuff. Right now, Steven Trout at Texas State. I think I have more worries with Steven Trout than I do with Mitch Thompson, just for the fact that he hasn't been a head coach for Division I baseball for that long. But he's also built quite a powerhouse at Texas State. Should have gone to the Super Regionals. Should have beaten Stanford in that regional, but neither here nor there. I like him a lot, but is he too green?
Nah. No, because I'll say this. Outside of those two guys we're mentioning, Trout and Thompson, I don't know that you're bringing in like a power. I know Trout's not a Power 5, but like a Power 5 head coach. Like you're not. You're looking at top line assistants, which is still, that's a good path. I like Trout a lot. And he's kind of gone a traditional route. By the way, played for Schlossnagle at TCU. So maybe a little bit of beef there, but got quite an education in baseball. Roomed with Jake Arrieta at one point. That's future pitching coach, maybe. I'm just dropping MLB names on you.
Imagine.
For this search. But anyway, all that to say. So he played JUCO, TCU, and pretty solid player at TCU back in the Mountain West days. And then you look at his coaching kind of evolution here, and it's JUCO, Texarkana, success. Assistant at Texas State, had some good years. Then he goes and coaches for Randy Mazey at West Virginia, who I think has built a hell of a program in terms of what your recruiting base is for West Virginia and the baseball legacy history there. Randy Mazey's done a pretty dang good job, and Steven Trout was a guy he really wanted on his staff and got him for a couple of years, and then turns around Texas State right away. His first year, they're pretty good. I think they just missed the postseason. 2021's a down year. And then this year they lost 11 games. I get it. It's a lower level of competition, but they were beating the Power 5 teams they were playing midweek, including Baylor, by the way. They had a hell of a season. They were in the top 10 for most of it. Like you said, kind of blew it late. That should have been in the Super Regionals this weekend. Instant success. And he's 30, 37. But in terms of a 37-year-old, that's a guy with a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And kind of that natural evolution. He's coached and played under some great minds and obviously knows the layout of Texas. We talk about that a lot with football coaches, knowing Texas. But I think it might be even more important for baseball because of what we talked about, the lack of scholarships. It's kind of tougher to recruit. If you know the coaches around here and that high school baseball coach can say, hey, man, you might not get a scholarship right away, but if you go and play for this guy, Like, you're going to develop into a hell of a player. Your guys are going to win some games. That goes a long way. And obviously Mitch Thompson has that even more so. But it's not like you're lacking that with Steven Trout because he coached at Texas State.
Knocked off number 9 TCU, beat Oklahoma in 2021. He talked about beating Texas and Baylor this season. There was a 3-year stretch where he played in the Shriners Classic twice. And if anybody out there knows anything about the Shriners Classic, it's a really good competition in the non-conference down in Houston, playing at Minute Maid Ballpark too. So he's brought Texas State to a level of competition where they're not only beating those teams, but putting themselves in position to play those teams consistently where they're willing to do so too, not just for a check, but also to be competitive. I again, though, there's the idea that he was hired, 2019 was his first year as head coach at Texas State. And is that a big enough sample size when you just got done with Steve Rodriguez, who had never gone to the World Series at Pepperdine, was a solid mid-major coach? Do you think Baylor shies away then from the mid-major realm because of what they're just getting off of?
No, but I can see your point there. Because, the other assistants that are being mentioned are obviously all, like, really top tier. Sean Allen at UT, it's a team that's 1 win away from Omaha.
Gary Anderson, Tennessee, who we have taken off the list after he just dropped every F-bomb in the book and then got thrown out of the game this past weekend.
Maybe we can use a little bit of that edge. That's all I'm saying. Mitch Thompson's brother, who I think I read somebody, I think Max Garner had mentioned Mitch Thompson's brother at Arkansas.
Yeah.
Interesting. But all that to say, you're looking at assistants from really top tier programs.
Right.
So I would say no, but that's just like a personal look at it in terms of shying away from the mid-major. I don't think so. Because again, I think the drop-off between Power 5 and good mid-major programs, which is what Texas State is right now, in baseball is not a huge drop. It's not like it is in football, like, outside of Cincinnati this year in football, the mid-majors, it's a big drop-off. But in baseball, I don't think it is. I mean, right now, Texas State is a better program than what you have right now at Baylor.
Yeah.
So,
Coastal Carolina wins the national championship, College World Series a few years back. Long Beach State or those, your Cal State.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are powerhouse. I mean, those are traditional.
Rice forever was just insanely. Southern Miss, Old Dominion. You're right, mid-major to the high level in the Power 5. I guess you couldn't even, you say power conferences in baseball.
Yeah.
Of these two guys, and you have Mitch Thompson, who's a little older. You have Steven Trout, not a little older. And again, as was told to me by a family member of a baseball player, there are two guys that the guys still left on the team really, really like. Two big names that they are privy to. And if either of them are hired, I'm sure Baylor, lets the bleeding a little bit when it comes to transfer portal. Is there one of those two that you then put above the other? You have the youth, you have the experience at Baylor. Where do you go?
I still go Mitch Thompson. But I will say, the longer this goes, the closer that we get to July 1st, and he's the easiest guy, obviously at the top of lists, easiest guy to interview, makes the most sense. The longer we go, his season's over, by the way, both their seasons are over.
Yeah.
The longer we go without Mitch Thompson being named the head coach, the more I think, well, maybe he's not going to be the head coach. But yeah, I just think he's a guy who can come in and bring you success right away. And maybe Trout, being a younger guy, is more thinking, all right, this is going to take a couple years. Let's really build up this program. Whereas Mitch Thompson has all these connections. And by the way, Drake, not only does he have like the connections with high school coaches, but he's probably got half a roster right now that he can bring to Baylor next year.
Yeah.
And, they're not going to like the super regionals.
But both of these guys have rosters
bring a ton of guys.
Yeah, both of these guys have a roster that, had Baylor had that roster last season, would have, maybe not McClennan as much, obviously, as Texas State, but certainly Texas State. You bring their roster to Baylor last season, and they do the same thing, if not more so, with better facilities and whatnot.
Yeah. And like I say, the private schools, don't have a ton of resources in college baseball, but it's more than the JUCOs have. And I think, like you say, with the facilities, McClennan's got good facilities, but just overall, what he can hire as a staff, it's a winning situation at Baylor as well for a guy like Mitch Thompson in terms of just continuity. He can bring his staff there. They don't have to move. He can bring his players there, and he knows how things work at Baylor. Trout knows how it works in the Big 12. He obviously played under Schlossnagle too, but in terms of a continuity, he can just step right in. Knows kind of how to act, what to say at Baylor, knows kind of the hierarchy of things, even though it's, names have changed a lot in almost 20 years, but he can come in and give you some success right away, just hammering fundamental baseball. So maybe that's the purist in me, Drake, but I would love to see Mitch Thompson there.
Cam's nod goes to Mitch Thompson. Cam, the last thing that I kind of want to throw around with you is USC, Florida State, Ohio State all have openings for their head baseball coach. All three have one thing in common. Multiple things, I should say. They have the one thing that I want to hone in on. They have in common. None of them are in Texas. They're all four of these teams are in different conferences. None of them are in Texas. Is Baylor in danger of losing one of their guys in the short list to one of those schools in your mind?
Oh yeah, on the short list, yeah. The other thing those teams can offer is they have a lot of money. And again, it sounds like beating a dead horse, but it's such a bigger disparity in baseball.
But do they even go after the same guy?
Well,
Florida State's not calling Mitch Thompson.
No. I would say Ohio State is one because USC and Florida State, you've got great crops of talent, both players and coaches in those states. There probably is a Mitch Thompson at North Florida or Florida Gulf Coast or something like that they can hire in Tallahassee, and the same thing at USC. But Ohio is a little barren in terms of great competition around, and it's not exactly a pipeline, and you probably need more of a national recruiter. So I think in Ohio State is where you probably see someone like, a Sean Allen or someone like that, a top tier assistant coach. But they do have a lot of money that they can throw at these guys. It's interesting. The other day, someone that we both work with asked, how much does the Baylor baseball coach make? How much does college baseball coaches make in general? And I'm like, that's a good question. Because, Dave Aranda can make a couple $1 million as the Baylor football coach. Yes, he could have made more at Oregon. But, for some people, a couple million's enough.
Right.
But, it could be a big disparity between coaching at a place like Baylor and coaching at a USC or Ohio State. That could be a big difference. But so that's, I think, enticing for an assistant coach. But again, we're going back to Mitch Thompson. Yeah, he's not getting hired by one of those schools, and I don't think he really wants to at this point. I think he'd rather be at a Baylor at this stage of his life. Again,
guy loves Waco.
60. Yeah,
guy loves Waco.
He's not 85. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, folks, today's show is brought to you by Bet Online. I want to remind you of that, and thank you for making it your first listen every single day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Cam, I would not be surprised if the hire comes outside of these two guys, but
Mack surprises us. Always. To be honest,
so
if you
tomorrow,
go back to, I love thinking back to the Matt Rule coaching search, because that dude was never on any of the the Reddits or Twitter, none of it. It was PJ Fleck, Tom Herman, Jeff Brom, all those guys. And Aranda was the same way. We just had less of a beat on it. And Nikki Collin, did you ever say her name on Bear Down or on Sikkim 365? No, I don't think you did. So
Molly Miller. Yeah. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if it's somebody else somewhere out there. But these two guys are at the top of it. Sounds like a lot of players really like them, and I do too. Wouldn't be upset with either of these guys. And thank you again for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Second listen, Locked On NBA Draft Board, big board. You're gonna go look, see where Jeremy Sohan, see where Kendall Brown, they're gonna go, they're gonna land, because it'll likely be for both those guys in the top 20. Drink toll. Local news guy Cam Stuart, thanking you again for listening to Lock On Baylor today. Come back on Wednesday as we break down more stuff across the Baylor baseball coaching search, and who knows, we may even have the head man announced by then. This has been, always will be, Locked On Baylor.